Welcome to all mga Senyores, Inyo, Pamatii, a video podcast on Komposos and conceptual metaphors, the show where we have a talk that touches on the fascinating fields of both language and culture.
Get ready to dive deep into Komposos and conceptual metaphors, uncovering insights, stories, and whole new perspectives.
Whether you're an Ilonggo culture enthusiast, a language enthusiast, or simply curious about Komposos and conceptual metaphors,
you're in the right place.
I am Johanna Payanan.
I am Patricia Jane Trahidya.
I am Felicia Jed Alcazar.
And I am Angelic Chorus, and we will be your hosts and partners in exploring the interesting topic of Komposos from the conceptual metaphor angle. So grab your favorite beverage, settle in, and let's embark on this journey together.
So if this is your first time tuning into our series and you are curious about what exactly a Komposo and a conceptual metaphor is, feel free to check out our previous episode through the link in the description below.
This is the second part of our short podcast series, and for this episode, we will be talking about the conceptual metaphors embedded in the lyrics of the Komposo, Trahidya sa Igbaras, by another talented Ilonggo composer, of course, Sir Nestor Camiñan.
Nestor Camiñan Sr. resides in Barangay Ingore, La Paz with his wife and children. Apart from being a Komposo, Sir Camiñan also serves as a church pastor. He started composing and performing Komposos in 1979 with Pangabuhi sang Mananggiti and Sangkap sang Mananggiti as his earliest Komposos. His other Komposos include Kutso, EDSA Revolution, and Vir de los Reyes. He performed at popular radio stations like DYSI, Action Radio, and RMN. Mr. Camiñan has participated and won in multiple Komposo and Harana contests through the years, and the song we will be talking about is one of his works that have won first place. Currently, he is one of the Haranistas that perform every Sunday at the RMN radio program Harana.
You know what, Mr. Camiñan is really an impressive individual, right? Don't you think so, Pat?
Absolutely. Now, to really gain a better appreciation for the musical talent of our Komposo, Mr. Camiñan, let's listen to his performance of Trahidya sa Igbaras.
Masubo nga dili mabata ang natabo nga trahedya sa banwa sang Igbaras. Madamo nga kabuhi hinalingan na utas tangut lamang Itsatus sa bulan sa Oktubre 2006 ang tuig na tabo ang aksidente. Napuhag ang bumuduyo pag mga residente sa banwas ang Igbaras banwang alas 11 ang tagna pasado may isa ka sa lakyan nga di pa sa hiro nagtabo sa lupa mapahuli nga sa baryo natumba ang salat ang tanan na lubog kang hinatay mapahuli na puntahin sa ilapan nalan inabutan kasubong kasulog sa bahay sa mata sa luha inikan kabataan hinahingan na tula pagtugtog sa garong wala pag-ibig makita diri natin makita ang paglulugan gobyerno bumuluyo banwagan barangay mga pari mga pastor naghatag sing paglupay sa mga natunggan nakaangkot sing kalimay pagdiri utakpan ang istorya masubo sa natungdan nga mga pamilya kag ako nagabangayo sa inyo sing pasensya kay hindi alam dumo Igbaras nga Trahidya.
For a little context and to make this podcast more inclusive for all, especially to non-Hiligaynon speakers, the song tells a story of funeral attendees who are on their way home and caught by flood. Both government and non-government organizations also came forward to rescue the victims and console the families of the deceased.
What a tragic story, isn't it?
And what gives you even more goosebumps is the fact that this story was actually based on a real-life event that took place on October 2nd in 2006. So this is one way that Komposos preserve pieces of history.
Moving on, it is now time to single out the conceptual metaphors present in this Komposo. The first one can be found in the very first line, masubo nga dili mabatas, which translates to an unbearable sadness. Here, we will find the conceptual metaphor, sadness is a heavy load. And we will notice that the concept of sadness is being explained in terms of the concept of carrying a heavy load. This is a very appropriate metaphorical comparison because experiencing unhappiness drains a person emotionally, much like carrying a heavy load drains one's energy. It is actually difficult to bear sadness, just as it is difficult to carry a heavy load.
I do hope all this talk of sadness doesn't get you down as well, dear listeners.
But if ever that is the case, I've heard it's actually quite healthy to be open and expressive with your feelings.
Well, I agree with that. So, the next line we will examine is Mandamo o kabuhi hinali nga nautas, which translates to suddenly many lives had been taken. The conceptual metaphor found here is life is a rope, wherein the concept of life is being defined through the concept of rope. A life and a rope have a number of similarities.
For instance, ropes come in different lengths, just like a life that can be short or long. Ropes also have a beginning and an end point, just like life, with a starting point at birth and the end point at death. In addition to this, ropes are capable of being tied together, much like how lives of different people intertwine. Lastly, in the same way that a rope has thick, sturdy types and thin, fragile ones, people's lives can be described as strong and thriving or strained and falling apart.
So, what do you think your rope would look like if there was one that represented your life path? If I had one, it would definitely be the most colorful and prettiest one.
Oh, it would?
Of course, I don't let the obstacles in life get me down, you know. For me, the first step in having a happy life is to believe you'll have it. So take inspiration from this, dear listeners, and seize the happiness. Next, we have another line. Kasubong kasulog sang baha, sa mata sang natungdan ang pag-inig sang luha, which translates to, as strong as the surge of flood is the streaming of tears of the people affected. This contains the conceptual metaphor, the streaming of tears is a flood current. And this time, the concept of streaming tears is explained by using the concept of a flood current.
Choosing the concept of a flood current to define the streaming of tears is very understandable because both are essentially flowing liquids and are typically associated with sadness, since crying is caused by sadness itself and floods leave behind suffering victims.
Before we end, we would like to leave our dear listeners with a short snippet of our interview with Mr. Camiñan himself.
Our question for him was, what can Komposos contribute to our society? And this was his answer.
May makita kita diri mo.
Ang sabi,
Ari o. Diri naton makita ang pagbinuligay. Gobyerno, pumunuyo, banwa kag barangay. Mga pare, mga pastor, nagatag sing paglupay. Sa mga natungdan nakaangkon sing kalipay. Ang kwantiri sang gobyerno pag sang banwa, ang ila dire nga pag unite amo ning pinaka-importante nga sa tion sang trahedya, amo ning pinaka-importante gid kini pagitang mga rescuer no, amo sila mga importante
kaya mo nang nagabuli.
oo ining mga pari niya pag pastorya, so sa time na lang niya sa mga misa ito sa lubong may i-encourage nila ang tao hindi magkasubo magkadlo kaya hindi tanan ginbu mapabubuton sang Ginoo nga tira na po to bangilar kabuhi amo na yung iya sa pari ay mga pastor. So ang mga rescuer ang ila naman katungdanan dyan na amo naman yung pag-save sa buhi ang pag-retrieve sa patay na amo ni pinaka-importante diri. Ang iba niya yapwa detalye na lang ni pero ini ang rescuer pag ang sa gobyerno amo ni pinaka-importante pag ining mo ni siya.
To give context for those of us who don't know Hiligaynon, Mr. Camiñan based his answer on his own Komposo, Trahidya sa Igbaras. Here, the Komposo shows us how events in history teach us important lessons in life. We learn of how the government and townspeople unite in times of extreme crisis and tragedy.
Trahidya sa Igbaras shows how priests and pastors help during the tragedy by giving the people strength, and how the rescuers help by selflessly risking their safety to save whoever they can and find those who have gone missing. So that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Ilonggo Komposos and conceptual metaphors.
We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and perspectives.
Stay tuned for more enriching discussions as we will feature one more Komposo for you.
Until next time, keep delving into the intricate layers of language and culture. Salamat, Gid!